Here we go again. It's almost election time. Just 3 months to go and the local government elections will be upon us. And to discuss this and what's going on with our democracy, we have with us Mr. Rohana Hettiarachchie, who is, of course, the Executive Director of PAFREL, and Mr. Manjula Gajanayake, who is the Executive Director of IRES, both of whom are well known as election observers in this country. Welcome, gentlemen. Good evening to Face to Face.
Good evening.
Right, Rohana, what's going on with the local government election? How soon can we expect it? I know the amendment bill was placed in Parliament, and now it's time for the public to give their opinions and perhaps challenge it.
Yeah, anyways, I think when you asked me to join this program, so I just checked with the dates, the possible date which we can go for elections. So the new amendment bill has been placed in Parliament last 9th. So there are 14 days window for people to challenge, or either people or people like us, the civil society. So the last date will be on 23rd. So
of this month.
Yeah, still there are some more days to go. And then again, the 21 days again will the maximum for the Supreme Court to give their judgment in case if someone go for a court. So with that calculations, I mean Parliament has to pass anyway after the even without legal challenging. So after 23rd of January, so at any time they can pass, they can take it to the second reading in Parliament and pass it. So if we go with that line, I think with the other calculations, for example now for nominations, so the Act clearly says, the draft already clearly stated that immediately after that pass the Parliament within 3 months, the Election Commission has to call for nominations. But then again, as you know that we also file a case and there is a court order. So soon as possible, the Election Commission has to do it. But with all that, there are, if there is a new nominations, there are 17 days for the nomination period. And for the campaign again 5 to 7 weeks. So if we go with the minimum dates, whatever the dates which Parliament passed the new bill or Act rather, 52 days. So maximum 66 days. So if you calculate minimum 52 days from 25th of January, I mean giving few more days for Parliament to pass the bill, so elections could take place somewhere around first week of April.
So the earliest it can be held
first week of April.
First week of April. Right.
And the maximum, I think, if you go with that line, third week of April after the elections actually, because the real date when we calculate it will be around 13th of April. 13th is, I mean, impossible because of the Sinhala Hindu New Year. So probably because Election Commission do have a windows 5 weeks to 7 weeks. So other dates are very fixed. The Commission can't change because it has to be, it's not necessary to be a Saturday, but it should not be a holiday. But mostly in our experience, in traditionally we go with the Saturday. But the nomination period is 17 days, you can't change that. Only campaigning period there is a flexibility to 5 weeks to 7 weeks. So Elections Commission can decide within that framework. So I think maximum end of April, before that we will have elections.
Now Manjula, let me bring you in here. We don't have any kind of tradition of having elections over the Avrudu, the New Year period, do we? And of course it might seem to make more sense to have it at that time because everyone's back in their villages, but then with all the people being on leave, civil servants and so on, and also the Nakat times would come into effect as well, all these auspicious times. So what's your viewpoint on that?
Yeah, I think I'm totally agree with what Mr. Rohana said actually with the timeline. Then basically if there's no any further challenge before the Supreme Court actually, that the possible time period should be the first week of April. But when you mentioned that the election time period, actually I remember that one or two elections have conducted during the April time period, that in the month earlier, maybe 2005, I can't remember exactly. However, I remember that I was spending time during election time period. The campaign period was falls on April. However, considering all the facts in recent times, actually we have not seen any election conducted on that time period. However, that the most possible time period should be the first week of April. Other thing is that there's a good lesson learned, that except 1982 referendum, all the government that conducted the postponed election have defeated. Then therefore I don't think that this Jatika Janabalawege government will postpone any elections, because they have learned a lot during past elections, because this is why we are here, that the conducting elections, because of that bitter truth, that postponement of continuous postponement for elections. Therefore, the most possible scenario should be the conducting the election during the first week of April.
Right. Rohana, has there been any indication from the government of any delay in this process? I think they seem to be eager to have the election as soon as possible.
I think from the government side, either politically or technically, I think this is the best time for them to go for a local elections as well as the provincial elections, because whoever run the country, even if they have a 2/3 majority, so day by day, that is the nature of country like us, the popularity will lose. So the best thing for them to have early elections early as possible. On the other hand, that there is a court order also, if the government is trying to delay, so there will be a pressure for the elections commission. I think now at the moment
you're referring to the Supreme Court order of last year,
which we also take part of it. There will be a pressure to the elections commissions to proceed with the elections if the government is trying to delay the elections, whatever the reasons. So even in fact, PAFL also in that position. So if there is an unnecessary delay, so then we will challenge that positions. But the government side, I think politically also it advantage for them. And at the moment they have already proceeded with the bill. Now only the time frame which they have given for the challenging period for the public. I mean, after 2 weeks, there is no any other difficulties to delay the process, because they can initially they can go for a second reading, and they do have a 2/3 majority. Easily they can pass it. I mean, there is no any sort of barriers from the parliamentary side. So therefore, I think elections has to take place before New Year, unless there is a court challenging. My gut feeling, and I mean technically with all the data which is available, and also the elections commission has also given a green line, because otherwise elections commission has to start their proceeding if there is unnecessary delay. Because I met the chairman of the elections commission and the CG even today, and we just discuss about the possible dates and the process. I mean, they are only waiting for with the understanding that because the previous the previous nominations, there's no rationale now. There are many candidate has passed away, and number of people has crossed over. There is no such a party. There are a lot of issues now. There is no practical point of view going with the same nominations. So therefore, they have some sort of understanding. But otherwise, if there is unnecessary delay, I'm sure that the elections commissions will proceed with that. So the government side also, I think they will proceed as they plan.
And Manjula, is there any indication from the opposition parties that they don't agree with the amendment bill?
There's no any indication, but the general public, you may remember that there was a big chaos because of that the number of local government members, including in this local government authorities. They have more than 8,700 local government members within a local government system. However, you may remember that the former Prime Minister, Mr. Dinesh Gunawardena, appointed a special committee headed by Mr. Mahinda Deshapriya to reduce members of local government local government authorities. Accordingly, as we heard, we couldn't read the report because it is not in the public domain. Therefore, as we heard, they have reduced the number of members up to 5,500. That is one demand. That mean actually there are pros and cons. That mean that is the perception of general public. Regarding in terms of opposition parties, they have not revealed anything yet, because before that they have some problems to sort out themselves, because the first one was that there was a long standing issue related to national list members whom to appoint their members to the national list.
Yes.
That is one thing. And
quite scandalous that they took so long to appoint their national list members.
Yes, still and due to the past experience, I don't think that any of opposition party or any other political party leader will against the conducting elections, because now they also can see now that the earlier, if any government has 2/3 super majority, they can take many decisions and they can do anything as they wish. Now there are social media. Then it is that we can see now the decision making process also little bit slow. Therefore, now opposition parties also will see that there's a window, there's an opportunity to them to enter into this contest. I think this is a golden opportunity for opposition parties also. And other side, it is a litmus test for the new government. This is the very first election that they are going to contest face after having a super majority. Then it should be a real contest between political parties in Sri Lanka.
And it is just to add what Manjula said. Now, I think in my understanding that the opposition part with the concurrence or with the understanding of all the opposition parties, I think one person went to the Supreme Court also again, asking to press nominations and hold the elections commissions to proceed with the present nominations. I think there is a court case against on that. I think that is from the opposition party side. And also we learned that all the political parties, including the ruling and the oppositions, they get together and they discuss, they consult each other, and they do have some sort of unanimous agreement to go for a press nominations. So I think therefore there is no any challenge so far. We haven't seen.
Well, you never know with Sri Lanka's political parties, because all of a sudden, last minute, some person who no one's ever heard of pops up and challenges.
When it comes to preparation, actually, another thing is that some of major political parties are going to create a coalition. Still they are in the preparatory phase. However, focus in local government, they are going to create some coalition. It is not a new thing in Sri Lankan politics, that creation of some coalitions. However, that means that they also getting ready to face this critical election.
Yes, and actually the nominations which were called 2 years ago after those nominations were called, I believe that various parties formed coalitions back then. We had all kinds of new coalitions which were formed, which are no longer relevant. They're not even there. They don't exist. There was some talk about a symbol of a helicopter. And a lot of memes and jokes about it.
Crash landing.
Yes, that it had crashed, and now we don't hear of the helicopter alliance. So like that, these political alliances do shift around, but so far we haven't seen anything concrete, have we?
Yeah.
Right. Now let's go back to the nominations of 2 years ago. What was the cost to the country? Wasn't it in hundreds of millions of rupees, where the nominations were called, so much preparatory work was done, and finally the election was not held? What's your opinion of that, Rohana?
I think that is really sad part. With the economic crisis, knowing everything by the government, former government, they postponed the elections. Actually, technically, there's no such a postponement, but they were not released the money which was passed by the parliament,
which was illegal,
which was also illegal, and the former government, actually they play with the local elections. I mean, not only them, actually even the previous government also did the same in a different way. But the last government, they allow to call the nominations because there was no options for them also. But finally, the Sri Lanka, with the crisis, 1.3 billion. 1.3 billion. It's quite big money. For the entire elections at that time, actually, I think the elections commissions, finally, they were prepared to go for a election with somewhere around 7 to 8 billion. So, more than 1 billion, 1.3 billion money is already utilized. Even the ballot papers were printed, so the polling official was trained in certain extent. So it was huge cost for the calling the nominations. Now again, we have to when we call the press nominations, again the entire amount of money, maybe roughly about again the 10 billion money which you have to utilize for the local elections with this crisis again. And maybe I don't know, I mean, whether we can go for a local elections and the provincial elections together. It's not easy because provincial elections also do have the different issues. There's either we have to pass the delimitations or we have to go back to the previous system. That is the only two options. So I don't know.
So let's get to the provincial council elections later.
Yeah.
But
my point was, if there is any possibility to go for both elections together, I mean, we can save some sort of money, but otherwise one election's cost will be 10 billion. So then both elections 20 billion rupees. For the previous nominations, we have spent almost 1.3.
So what you're saying, and it's very clear to everyone, is that the previous government wasted 1.3 billion rupees, knowing very well that those nominations would not be utilized at a time when the country was suffering.
Exactly.
I mean, nearly 7 million people were below the poverty line, and you know, we couldn't afford anything close to that. You know, 1.3 billion rupees. So that's quite criminal, isn't it? It's beyond belief.
Yeah, in that case, you know, some of government officials acted that they are actually very irresponsible manner. You know that at that time government printer already printed, as we know that as we heard, ballot papers for almost 15 districts. That means a huge cost, no? But finally, that the head of government printer told that the media that they are waiting for the government order to print because they have not received advance payment from election commission. That means ballot papers for 15 districts. We don't know whether we can use it again. However, it is a huge waste of money, as Mr. Rohana said.
No, Manjula, you can't use it unless if you are going with the same nomination, because the new political parties, we do not know whether the same parties will contest or whether new parties, new alliance can be in the next nomination paper. So it is completely impossible.
It's just a lot of waste paper, which hopefully the government printer will recycle it and not just throw it away.
Government printer also responsible in a way. I think I can remember, I don't know, Manjula can make me correct. Election Commission asks whether they can release the ballot papers which they have already printed.
Yes.
To start the postal voting, but the government printer did not release because she also play with the government. And always all the elections, the government printer print the ballot papers or whatever the Elections Commission requirement and get the money after a couple of months, because we have analyzed the whole history. That was the history in Sri Lanka. The government printer, how they deal with the Elections Commission. But first time they ask advance. They ask Elections Commission to pay the whole amount of money to release the ballot papers.
And was there ever any explanation from the government printers about this?
No, there was no such explanations. Not only government printer, again, as Manjula just mentioned, the Secretary of the Public Administrations. The first time they instruct to the GAs, because GAs are the returning officers, but in a way they work under the public administration's ministry. The secretary instructs the returning officers, or rather GAs, not to accept the nominations, what do you call, deposit. That is completely illegal, but later they apologize to the Elections Commission. That is how the previous government play with the elections. So I think they are fully responsible of these money waste, around 1.3 billion.
It is a very interesting case to study, even, thanks to PAFREL and other organization. They went before Supreme Court and got a judgment, but actually they were expecting to have like that, having elections as soon as possible, not to ask who are the responsible persons to postpone the elections. Therefore, that government printer, what they did, that we know that they were the responsible persons to authorities to postpone the elections, Ministry of Secretary as well as government printer, and as Mr. Rohana said, the secretary to the public administration. But there's no any further actions against them. Even he passed away, actually, that the secretary to the public administration, but Election Commission, they also didn't take further any actions against such particular officials. Therefore, as the compensation may be that the previous government under the leadership of Mr. Ranil Wickremesinghe, they extended from 6 months the tenure of the job of the government printer. Now, recently, under the new government, they have appointment another officials. That is the story. Anyway, if there's any researcher to study this case, it is a wonderful case to study.
Indeed, but in the end, the people lost 1.3 billion rupees, because even those who were found to be guilty of abusing their powers didn't have to pay that money, did they? I think it was just some token gesture, even though the Supreme Court found them to be guilty, they got off pretty much scot-free.
In the sake of the executive arm, he's the person who given all the orders, because all the officials were coming under the executive arm. Then we have to rethink on election process as well as Election Commission, how to secure their autonomous power when it comes to conducting elections, how to strengthen their legal unit, as well as how to obtain money. Is there any strategic ways? Those are the subject areas that we need to talk when it comes to elections, I mean from election commission side?
And the one key point which Manjula highlighted, independence of finance. So whatever the commissions which you call, I mean we call these independent, all the commissions are independent, we call it independent commissions, but if there is no financial independence, so they can't go by their own, always they have to wait the government. I mean government do have a enormous way to control through the government machinery and directly with the finance. So I think at least the elections commission for future changes, future reforms, financial independence, it should be there. Otherwise no point just to call them as a independent elections commission.
Absolutely, and we will get into the reforms which I believe are needed, and you gentlemen are the experts on that, but we'll take a short commercial break right now and we'll be right back.
This is where dreams take flight, where stars are born, and the future of international cricket shines the brightest.
She is setting the stage alight.
16 nations will compete for World Cup glory in Malaysia.
She is putting on a show here.
And they are champions.
The ICC Under-19 Women's T20 World Cup 2025 begins January 18 on TV1.
Welcome back to Face to Face. We are with Mr. Manjula Gajanayake of IRIS and Mr. Rohana Hettiarachchie of PAFREL, and we're discussing the upcoming local government elections, which hopefully will take place in the first couple of weeks of April, although no date has yet been set. Let's look at election reform. Manjula, we had two major elections just a few months ago. In September we had the presidential, in November we had the general election. And we were talking even on this program about the need for reform way before that. But what are the lessons that we learnt from those two elections, and what more needs to be done to make this a properly functioning democracy?
Yeah, there are many lessons. You know that in election, when it comes to elections, that we have conducted most crucial national to both parliamentary and presidential elections. Therefore, we have learned many lessons learned. However, I would like to mention few of them, and Mr. Rohana also will add some of other factors. Then the number one is, you know that when you last time in 2020, as I remember, the last this time actually in 2020, we have conducted our parliamentary election of 5th August 2020. In that time, almost 4 million voters totally were excluded from the process because there were many reasons. Therefore, they were not able to cast their votes. That at that time we were thinking actually we can make into right track such things. However,
that's in 2020.
2020. However, finally, what has happened at the time, it is 4 million now. When it comes to this election, it is almost 6 million, no, 5.5 million voters were unable to vote. Out of that amount, maybe numbers, maybe nearly 4.5 million voters also excluded from the process because they didn't have some facilities because of nearly 3 million, maybe more than 3 million Sri Lankan voters are in abroad. Then they don't have facilities. But before
no, let's discuss this a little bit in depth. Nearly 3 million overseas. I mean, the number varies because there's no proper registration.
True.
Not everybody registers with the Foreign Employment Bureau. Only those who go through the Foreign Employment Bureau actually register with them. So many people who go overseas for a job, they aren't even known to the Foreign Employment Bureau. Right. So on the other hand, we have countries like Australia, again part of the Commonwealth, part of the same democratic
exercise
sphere.
in democracy.
They require their citizens to vote. Correct me if I'm wrong, but if you don't vote, you have to actually have a proper excuse, otherwise there is a fine.
50 Australian dollars.
Exactly. So now, and that's it, no matter where you are in the world, unless you can provide an excuse. So if you are in another country, you can still vote. And we see this in our own newspapers. When Australia is having an election, you see the Australian High Commission placing advertisements in our newspapers saying, come and vote to their citizens who are here. So why don't we do this? I mean, we have all these missions overseas, all these ambassadors and high commissioners. What are they doing? Why can't they do the same thing?
Before replying that particular question, actually, let me to say that in a Sri Lankan situation, Sri Lanka is a country that not much interested on data and statistics. You know that once Pafferel actually did a research that Pafferel was able to collect all the relevant data related to that the migrant workers in Sri Lanka. Accordingly, they found that almost 2.4 million Sri Lankan female workers are working in Middle East countries. Nearly 1 million people are in other countries, mostly as skilled workers, professionals and academia. That's the situation. However, as you correctly mentioned, in Sri Lanka, none of Sri Lankan agencies is not updating such data and statistics. Not only that, even at what time actually we have done our last census, it is 2012. Still, that the tradition is actually we have to conduct the national census in each 10 years time, but however still preparation is going on.
That's the international norm. Globally, every 10 years.
Otherwise, how to develop the country based on the correct data? We have to correct the system. That's the major problem. Another thing is, as I mentioned, that in Sri Lankan situation, that there were many of parliamentary committees as well as other commissions, almost altogether maybe nearly 10 or 11 reports have been published related to electoral reforms process. However, in that electoral reform process, I mean in those documents, that particular subject, that particular area have highlighted, that is overseas voting. However, that we have not been able to make something correct to the system.
So let me bring Rohana in here. So Manjula says at least 10 parliamentary committee reports on this, and yet we have never seen any party bringing a bill before Parliament to make this a reality. Why is that?
Actually, the reforms agenda in Sri Lanka, except maybe one or two, is a job, or rather political game. I think, as Manjula correctly mentioned,
but it's playing games with our democracy.
Exactly. I can argue with anyone. I can give you examples on that. I think from 1994, with His Excellency Chandrika Bandaranaike Kumaratunga period up to now, there are constitutional reforms committee, number of committees, and all these the constitutional reform committee, they have discussed about the electoral reforms also, because without talking about the electoral reforms, electoral system, you can't change the constitutions. So there are at least 3 or 4 or 5 Constitutional Reform Committee until Gotabaya Rajapaksa. President Rajapaksa also appointed the committee. And then again, Electoral Reforms Committee, very particular Electoral Reforms Committee also took place, at least 5 during this period. I can, under Dinesh Gunawardana's committee, there's something has happened at that committee. There are 2 committees. 2003 there was a reform committee headed by Dinesh Gunawardana. 2004 again. 2022 again the Dinesh Gunawardana's committee, and again the local government reforms committee headed by former Minister of Local Government. During the same period, having these Prime Ministers headed reform committee under the RW's government, again they appoint the reform committee for electoral reforms. Mainly, there may be genuine part also, maybe 10-15%, but mainly used as a delay tactics for the local elections. Again, the delimitations committee also, which they use for as a delay tactics. So all these reform committees, whoever done during that period, for political gain. But there are such a good report, because all these committees, even under Dinesh Gunawardana's committee, I think including CMEB, PAFRL, political parties, other civil society, so everyone submit their proposals. Even Gotabaya Rajapaksa's period, all these committees, I think, consulted by the people, most of them, and there is such a good proposals, but there is no political will, because it is not a genuine effort. Sometimes the half of that, or maybe 50%, 40%, there may be genuine part also, but there is no political will to implement those recommendations. For example, now, I mean, before we start, I just explained to you for the compulsory, the identifications document, which was brought up 1959. Then it came Dinesh Gunawardana report in 2003. Actually, it implement in 2006 once PAFRL went to Supreme Court and get the court order. This is how this reforms agenda. But for this, the point which was raised by Manjula and your questions about why Australia is implementing, why Sri Lanka can't do that, I mean, the main reason is the political will. But there is a technical, practical reasons also. Now, almost all these countries which we are talking, most of the countries, not all, some Asian countries also which is using for advanced voting mechanism, overseas voting mechanism for voters to mark their ballot. But most of the countries, the people who are working overseas are white collar people who are doing white collar jobs, quite educated people. But the research which Manjula mentioned, actually he took a leadership on that research also. Mostly unskilled laborers, those who base in Arabic countries like Dubai,
Saudi Arabia,
Kuwait, Oman, but around 2.5 million. But as Manjula mentioned, it's very difficult to get the exact data, correct data. But somehow, I think with 6-month exercise, we managed to collect some sort of data. But most of these countries, these unskilled laborers are living away from the embassies, 1,000 kilometers away from the embassies. Even if we organize, because the popular overseas voting mechanism is the embassy voting. Now, when it comes to Sri Lankan embassy voting, number one, embassies are highly politicized, and easily these voters can be pressurized. And secondly, they are actually they are marginalized in outside the country, especially they can pressurize at any time. And whether they can come to these embassies 500,000, 600,000 people. It's not a small number. But then again, the advantage also, it has not spread all over. It has only covered 6-7 countries mostly. And the third issue is whether we have financial capacity to set up a separate mechanism all those countries. So there are some practical issues which before we implement, before we pass the law, in principle, yes, we have to accept, we have to have a policy, because they are the people actually who are still bringing money here, bringing dollar here. So we need to respect them.
I mean, it's their right.
Exactly.
Democratic right.
Exactly. But there is my point here. Before we touch on that, there are again nearly 500 to 1 million people within the country. Those who are unable to go to their specific polling stations on the polling day, there should be a system, like people like you, people like us, elections observers, media people, remand prisoners, doctors, patients, private security people. There are so many people, maybe around, again there is no specific data, but at least 500,000 to 1 million. Easily we can set up a system. Easily we can set up a system in country people, because there are many countries like even in Thailand, Bangladesh, Myanmar, they have some sort of system. Even Philippines, I mean, there is no, economically there is no big gap with these countries. So easily we can change small changes on the reforms agenda. We can adapt those people in the system.
Now, those countries you mentioned, what is the system that they use in order to ensure that even people within the country can vote? Because, I mean, Rohana, we're talking about elderly people.
Yeah.
I recall in the last election, when I did manage to go and vote, there was a lady who was 96 years old, and she insisted on coming and voting. And she couldn't walk, so she was being carried in by her relatives, and it was, you know, the problem was that the polling station simply was not built for this. I mean, it's a school. That's the polling station, and it doesn't have proper facilities for differently abled or elderly people. So it was quite a struggle for this lady to actually come in and vote. So, I mean, these are people who, again, it's their democratic right. Just because you're 96 or, you know, 110 doesn't matter. You should be able to vote. And then we have, I mean, it's elderly people, pregnant ladies. You have so many differently abled people in Sri Lanka. We as a nation, we have a very high percentage of differently able people.
Exactly.
So
1.6 million, I don't know whether the figure is correct. I mean, the disabled community, other than the elderly people and the pregnant people, I mean, it can be then the 3-4 millions.
Exactly.
But this is worldwide problem actually. But most of the countries do have some sort of mechanism to get their vote also into count. Now, some countries, for example, even though they are not democratically healthy, like Myanmar, Cambodia, I mean, when you look at Sri Lankan democracy, and they are below in overall. But even those countries, I do have experience. I do have my personal experience. Now, the elections official visit those places with the political party agents couple of days prior to the election day. There are some countries, they do have a system to identify the elderly people or rather disabled people through their mechanism.
But again, Rohana, if I may interrupt you, our government departments know who is elderly. The Gramanillari in any division knows the ages, and that data has gone to the divisional secretariat and to the central government. They know, all, who's differently abled. They've got all that data. So it's they don't have to reinvent the wheel. You don't need the elections commission official actually having to go door to door.
No. What I'm saying is they do have a data, those countries do have a data, and they have a law also. That is the duty of the elections officials under the commissions or a department or whatever, to identify those people and visit house to house prior to the elections, identified places, not the entire voter populations, but identified places through the village headman here in Sri Lanka in the Grama Niladhari. So that is a one system. I have witnessed with the elections officials, with the political party agents, walk to the houses, those who are unable to come to their polling stations on the election. That is one system. And there are some postal voting system also. And there is some advanced voting system. For example, in Thailand, even if you are a farmer, you don't want to give a very specific reasons, but let's say simple example, your wedding is planning maybe you plan maybe 4 to 6 months ahead the elections, and we do not know the elections date sometime. But when we realize that, okay, my election day is coming with the same day with my wedding day, so I can request, or I can register some other day prior to the elections, some specific place, maybe 2-3 places in a district. So if I know that on the elections day I can't physically go to my polling stations, whatever the reasons, so I can register there, then I can go and vote. So there are many ways. And for example, Afghanistan, I mean, compare with again the democracy, we are much better, right? Even during now the situation has changed with the Taliban back to government, but the before 2000, I think my experience couple of occasions, but I think 2009, I have seen that the Taliban prisoners, there is a system mobile voting. So the team of mobile, the vehicle, go to remand prisoners and get their vote. So there are enough example which we can take here and change the small legal framework, and we can allow every citizen's voting in a specific elections.
I must say that when we are comparing Sri Lanka with, which is one of the oldest democracies in Asia, certainly when we are comparing it with Afghanistan, it's a little bit silly that we haven't moved forward. Sorry to say, and successive governments are at fault. But Manjula, President AKD, before he became president, did speak very often on the podium about these very topics, these issues. Has there been any move to set this right?
I think you are correct. However, as I understood actually that his intention is not to bring forward some of particularly election related reforms in a broader level, actually introduction of a new constitution to the country. In such an exercise, we know that if there is a broad process to introduce a new constitution of Sri Lanka, it is an integral part that given to electoral reform process. Then I'm pretty sure that if there's a process that we can talk and we can do many more things related to the electoral process. But let me say this thing also, that when you say that no need to reinvent the wheel, that it is the same thing. If you can remember, Mr. Rohana, myself and many more people also submitted their proposal before the committee headed by Mr. Lal Gajanayake in 2016, when they are obtaining public views to introduce a new constitution. Then actually we have to revisit those ideas also. Then you can make easy that constitution making process also. Then as the particular question that AKD, that I strongly believe that if there's a process that almost that not only election professionals, election observers and other media and almost all the people will be able to give their ideas into the process, then we hope that at least not after the local government election, maybe after the provincial council elections, they will start the process of introduction of new constitution.
Well, I certainly hope so, Manjula, because I would hate having to have this same discussion with the two of you in 5 years' time when the next major elections, presidential and parliamentary, due. And we are almost out of time. So final thoughts from Rohana about campaign finance. And we speak about this in the backdrop of the police now beginning to take action against hundreds of candidates from the last election who didn't submit their accounts.
Well, that is also related to the previous questions, the reforms. For the last presidential elections, which is the first one which we exercise on this new law, I think there are 12 people has already, people in a sense, the candidate plus party, they have not submit the document, their income and expenditure reports. The police has already taken actions. Now the court proceeding also started. Then again, the local elections, I think, which we forgot about, this LP tier, again more than 100 people or candidate has not submit their report. Then again, the elections, I just checked with the Elections Commission, just in a sense, in the morning today, they have filed the case against those people. And for the parliamentary elections, nearly 1,300 people, they have not either party or either candidate, mostly the candidate, because there are two reports, candidate by himself and the political party as a party or independent groups. So again 1,300 people has the Election Commission proceed with the case. Now the problem here is, again, we are talking about the upcoming local elections. So there will be 80,000, with the previous nomination there are 80,000 candidates. So in case, if the same number, we compare with the parliamentary elections, 8,888 candidates. Out of that, 1,300 has not submit. If you analyze with the local elections, so there, if in the same manner, there will be again 10,000 people may not submit their reports in a given time frame. So whether this is useful for police and the police, attorney's department, time and resource, and also the court. Actually, this is one of the area where we need to revisit. So my argument is, there are the other ways also, analyze the data, whether these candidates submit proper data, or whether they exceed the amount, whether they have taken the money from illegal places. That's a different scenario. But just looking at only on the date which they have to submit, it's very clear. So my argument and my proposal is, the law has to be changed. If someone has not submitting their report in a given time frame, it should be automatically disqualified for these candidates for next 3 years, because law is very clear. For as a candidate or as a voter, it should be automatically disqualification process has to be take place with the new amendment for the campaign finance law.
So a lot of reforms are needed. However, we won't have all those reforms in place before April, which is when we expect the local government election. I'm afraid we are out of time. Thank you very much to my guests, Mr. Rohana Hettiarachchie, Executive Director of PAFREL, and Mr. Manjula Gajanayake, Executive Director of IRIS. Thank you very much for joining me this evening, gentlemen. And thank you to you.
Thank you for taking
home.
us here.
Thank you very much for watching. And don't go away, because the news is coming up next, as always. Have a good evening.